Magic the Gathering's new premier remastered set, Innistrad Remastered, is at local game stores now. But this isn't just a set for you to rip wrappers and crack packs with, because you should not be doing that in the first place with any set. Buy singles. But you can actually play with booster packs of Innistrad Remastered. It's true, by participating in a draft or sealed event. Right now, you are able to draft Innistrad Remastered at your local game store, and honestly, for all my prior concerns that there would be difficulty combining different Innistrad sets that were not designed to work together into a single, fun, draftable set, I am actually pretty impressed by what the designers of Innistrad Remastered were able to pull off. This video will teach you everything you need to know to play in an Innistrad Remastered draft or sealed event. What archetypes can you build from, and what are the key cards to look out for in each? What build-around cards might get passed your way, and what are some cool card interactions that exist? What are the biggest bombs and best cards in each color? This video will cover it all. Please note, this video will also be assuming that you already know the basics of how to draft or how to build a sealed deck, and will focus instead on intermediate advice for Innistrad Remastered Limited. But fear not, because if you or a friend is brand new to draft or sealed, check out our introductory videos on the subject here and here, or of course, linked in this video's description. And remember that I am giving away 4 boxes of Innistrad Remastered this Monday on my Whatnot stream. 2 free collector booster boxes and 2 free play booster boxes to be sent out to you anywhere in the world, and all you have to do is tune in this Monday. I'll also give you $15 to spend on Magic the Gathering packs, cards, and other items in my Whatnot store when you create a new account at www.whatnot.com/Tolarian College. So come hang out with me this Monday and maybe, just maybe, walk away with some free booster boxes of Innistrad Remastered. Now, let's begin by covering the mechanics of Innistrad Remastered. Mechanics. All the mechanics of Innistrad Remastered Limited are, of course, returning mechanics. Although these mechanics were pulled from every Innistrad set across multiple blocks and were not originally designed to be played together, some of them actually synergize better with one another than you might expect. See, even though the original Innistrad block was different from the Shadows over Innistrad block, which was itself different from the Midnight Hunt Crimson Vow pseudo block, because all 3 blocks took place on Innistrad, they all have similar themes: Gothic horror, graveyard shenanigans, and creature-typal synergy among humans, werewolves, vampires, zombies, and spirits. The mechanics are reflective of these themes, and therefore have more in common with one another than a remastered set of a less thematic plane might. For example, blood tokens actually help set up your madness cards. In fact, these 2 mechanics are so strong together that my suspicion is that red-black might be the best archetype in Innistrad Remastered right out of the gate. Blood tokens were already good for smoothing your draws in a set without madness, but discarding a madness card to the blood tokens is just ridiculously good. Flashback and Disturb also play well together, since all the same cards that are good with Flashback are also good with Disturb. Both Flashback and Disturb cards can be milled over or discarded for value. Morbid and Emerge are great together too, since casting a creature for its Emerge cost turns on Morbid, and sacrificing a big creature to emerge means you'll have plenty of mana left over to cast your Morbid spell. All this is to say there's a lot more sideways synergy in this set than you might expect for an amalgamation of so many different sets. So those are the mechanics, but what exactly should you be building in your draft or sealed event? Let's discuss the limited archetypes and which cards to look out for. Despite Innistrad Remastered being an amalgamation of more than half a dozen sets from across over a decade of Magic history, the designers of Innistrad Remastered have managed to create some clearly defined archetypes within this set's limited environment. Most of these archetypes have a Signpost Uncommon gold card. However, 2 different color pairs, both Azurius and Gruul, do not. Instead, these 2 have a pseudo gold card, a monocolor card with a different color activated ability. The ally color pairs basically have 2 themes: a kindred theme of one of the 5 main creature types on Innistrad, as well as a broader mechanical theme that pairs well with the kindred theme. For instance, Azurius has a lot of spirits, and spirits tend to have a lot of enter the battlefield effects. Therefore, the Signpost Uncommon pseudo-gold card for Azurius, Spectral Shepherd, works well with spirits that have strong enters effects. The Signpost Uncommon for Dimir is a powerful zombie lord, but there is also a lot of self-mill enablers in Dimir colors that happen to play well with zombies. Archghoul of Thraben is a zombie card draw engine that can also dump flashback and disturb cards into your graveyard, while Makeshift Mauler and Cobbled Lancer need to exile cards from your graveyard in order to be cast. Rakdos is the vampire deck and the madness deck. As we discussed previously, the blood tokens that many vampires make are a match made in heaven, or perhaps hell, for your madness cards. As you usually do in Gruul, you want to smash your opponent's face. Werewolf cards tend to be aggressively slanted and keen to get into the brawl of combat. Ulrich's Kindred, Gruul's Signpost pseudo-gold card, is perfect in those spots, as it makes blocking extremely difficult for your opponent by threatening to give any of your attacking wolves or werewolves indestructible until end of turn. The human archetype is in Selesnya, and as you might expect is a go-wide token strategy. Many of the token generators in Selesnya colors make human tokens specifically, which of course benefit from your Humans Matters cards. Join the Dance, for instance, is a powerful flashback spell that gives you 4 tokens for a single card once you have the mana to flash it back. Enemy color pairs, on the other hand, don't have the same kindred synergies. They might benefit from some kindred synergies in one or the other of their colors, but not to nearly the same extent as the ally color pairs. These archetypes are very straightforward. Orzhov is a classic sacrifice deck with plenty of sack fodder and sacrifice outlets. It can also make great use of the tokens that white can create to generate fodder, and the morbid cards found in black to get additional juice out of your sacrifices. Golgari is a morbid mid-range deck with lots of big creatures and plenty of removal. The sack outlets in black and the combat boosts in green both mean you'll reliably trigger morbid most turns of the game. The Signpost Uncommon Grizzly Ghoul is awesome to cast post-combat after you attack your wide board into your opponent's wide board. Simic is a self-mill value deck that loves both flashback and disturb cards. This deck will always want to splash black for spider spawning and forbidden alchemy specifically, which is easy to do in a base green deck with plenty of easy mana fixing. In fact, I might go so far as to say that spider spawning is the most important card in the Simic deck, as it's the best possible payoff for all the self-mill the deck is capable of. I actually am going to talk more about spider spawning later in the video. Izzet is a spells deck as usual, though this one has a bit more of a graveyard theme than spells decks often do. One of the more powerful things Izzet can do is set up a large Rise from the Tides, then buy it back to do it again with Mystic Retrieval. You'll need to have plenty of interaction in your deck to set this up though, since Rise of the Tides is a 6 mana sorcery and the tokens it creates are tapped, so you could get run over by an aggro deck before you have a chance to get this engine going. Boros is an aggro deck. Shocking, I know. This deck loves going wide as much as Selesnya, but without the same degree of human synergies. The deck also appreciates the combat-oriented red cards, such as the red Escalade cards and other combat tricks. But of course, Innistrad Remastered isn't just about picking 2 colors and sticking with them. There exist several really cool build-around cards which might come your way in the draft or that you might open in your sealed pool. I mentioned earlier Spider Spawning, and while that's the most popular, it's certainly not the only cool card that you might build your deck around, but nonetheless, let's start there. Build-around cards. Spider Spawning is one of the best build-around cards in the set. It was awesome in its original limited environment, and it will be awesome here. Forbidden Alchemy is one of the better ways to enable it, but Eccentric Farmer and Grapple with the Past do a great job setting up a big Spider Spawning as well. Be careful you don't deck yourself when you draft around Spider Spawning. Pick up any copies of Covetous Castaway you find, since it's both a great card to mill over and cast for its disturb cost later to shuffle your best cards in your yard back into your deck. Epitaph Golem is another important one for this archetype, since as long as you can keep it in play, you can prevent yourself from ever decking out. Crawl from the Cellar is another key card for this strategy, as it's a great Raise Dead effect that you can also cast from your graveyard. With all the self-mill in the set, it's actually doable to win the game with Laboratory Laboratory Maniac in Innistrad Remastered Limited. If you have Crawl from the Cellar, you can build around milling yourself out entirely, and then use Crawl to bring back Laboratory Maniac to win with an empty library. Burning Vengeance is another classic Innistrad build around. This is a very fun and powerful archetype if you can pull it off, but keep in mind it's also quite hard to do. You need a lot of cards with flashback to make it work, so cards like Think Twice, Forbidden Alchemy, and Silent Departure are all premium pickups once you start down this path. A nice little bonus for this deck is that Disturb cards all also trigger Burning Vengeance. Gravecrawler is also a great way to trigger Burning Vengeance multiple times if you have both a sacrifice outlet in play and a zombie. Innistrad Remastered is a set that spans over a decade of Magic card design. As such, there are some cards included in the set with strange interactions you might not have encountered if you're a newer player. I'm going to discuss a few of those here so that you're prepared if you come across them in your draft or sealed pool. Fiend Hunter is a powerful removal spell strapped to a creature just on its own, but because of the creature's older templating, there is a very cool trick to watch out for. Because the Enter's effect that exiles a creature is a different ability from the Leaving the Battlefield effect, you can permanently exile a creature if you blink or sacrifice Fiend Hunter in response to its Enter's effect. There are a ton of ways to do this in the set, from blink effects like Essence Flux, Deadeye Navigator, and Restoration Angel, to sack outlets like Flesh Taker and Falconwrath Torturer. You can do a similar thing with Spell Queller, permanently exiling a spell if you sacrifice your Queller in response to its trigger. The trick doesn't work if you blink Spell Queller though, because when it re-enters play, the spell will still be on the stack and will get exiled by Spell Queller's ability again, causing the original Spell Queller enter the battlefield to fizzle. The best possible spell to exile with Spell Queller in Innistrad Remastered is actually Memory Deluge. If you want to know what happens when Memory Deluge gets recast after the Spell Queller gets removed, read the last line of text on Spell Queller, and then the text on Memory Deluge to figure out how many cards you get to look at off your recast Memory Deluge. Thankfully, the designers of Innistrad Remastered did not include Day-Night in this set. That means all the werewolves in the set have the old templating. They transform when no spells were cast in a turn, or change back into their human side if 2 or more spells were cast in a turn. Remember that this mechanic checks if either player casts a spell. That means you can transform your opponent's werewolves by casting 2 spells, or interfere with their transformation by casting a spell on your opponent's turn when they try to flip their werewolf. Because this is a graveyard set, the designers of the set didn't include much in the way of graveyard hate. Soul Guide Griff is the only low-rarity graveyard hate card in the entire set, and is therefore an important pickup if you're in white. This also means exile-based removal and counterspells are even more valuable than they otherwise would be. Innistrad Remastered has several bomb cards that you need to watch out for in each color. Now obviously there are more bombs than I can talk about in this video, so don't assume that a card that I don't mention isn't good. Instead, I'd like to highlight what I think are some of the biggest bombs in each color, though I do also want to point out that you should assume any Planeswalker you open is great, because every Planeswalker in Innistrad Remastered really is fantastic. Some may require more building around than others, but they're all very good first picks. 2 of the best white rares are Vanquish the Horde and Wedding Announcement. Vanquish the Horde only needs 4 creatures in play to become a regularly costed Wrath of God, and any more than that reduces the cost of the spell to an absurdly low value. Wedding Announcement simply does it all. It creates tokens, it draws cards, and it eventually turns into a powerful and hard to remove Anthem effect for all of your creatures. It's fantastic. In blue, 2 of the biggest bombs are Docent of Perfection and Memory Deluge. Docent would be good even if it was a generic 5-mana 5/4 flyer, and it would certainly be good even if it was just a 5-mana 5/4 flyer that made wizards and didn't transform. But the fact that it can transform into a 6/5 flyer that makes wizards and gives those wizards +2/+1 and flying is just ridiculous. This is a slam dunk first pick. Memory Deluge is more subtle in how strong it is, but it's one of the best divination variants in limited history. Like most powerful card draw spells, you want to fill your deck with plenty of good cheap removal to slow your opponent down and have enough time to get your full value out of Memory Deluge. In black, Meathook Massacre makes a strong case for being one of the best individual cards in the entire set. It's a fantastic flexible sweeper that sticks around to punish your opponent whenever creatures die. Invasion of Innistrad is a card that might seem weird if you didn't play much with March of the Machine, but it's a stone-cold bomb, a potent removal spell that flips into a ridiculous zombie generation engine strapped to a graveyard hate piece. Handwire Garrison is a powerful card on its own that gets even better if you can also pick up a Handwire Battlements in the draft, or if you happen to open one in your sealed pool. If you first pick Handwire Garrison, any battlements that get opened are very likely to make it around the table to you, since it's a much lower priority pickup to anyone who doesn't already have the Garrison. Zealous Conscripts is a very powerful card even if all you're doing is stealing an opponent's big creature to attack with it for a turn. But there are a few ways to make it even better. For starters, you can always sacrifice their creature to a sack outlet to prevent them getting it back. But the best thing to steal with conscripts is an opposing planeswalker, especially if that planeswalker is primed to ultimate. In green, Tireless Tracker is an exceptional card, both as an ever-growing threat and a card advantage engine. It's especially good with Evolving Wilds, since Evolving Wilds gives you 2 landfall triggers with your Tireless Tracker in play. If you have a Tireless Tracker in hand, you should try to wait to cast it until turn 4 or later, so you can play it and then immediately play a land to get a trigger, even if your opponent has a removal spell. And while we're on the subject of green bombs, Unnatural Growth is a very, very strong card that is also very hard to cast. In a draft, if you pick this card early, your deck should be heavy green and you should avoid splashing a third color, despite how good green is at doing so. You don't want to be stuck with only 3 forests in play when you're trying to cast this card. With all these possible color pairs, mana fixing is something worth paying attention to, though I'm afraid options are somewhat limited, no pun intended, in Innistrad Remastered. Nonetheless, let's discuss some tips for things to pay attention to when it comes to mana fixing. Fixing is not great in this format, unless you're in green or you happen across an on-color slow land, which only appears in the rare slot of packs. You're heavily reliant on Evolving Wilds and Traveler's Amulet for your splash purposes. Wildfield Scarecrow isn't bad either, but it's better in slower decks than aggro decks. It's also not good at splashing cheap cards, since it costs 3 mana to cast and another 2 to sacrifice. In other words, it will take a while to turn the Scarecrow into mana fixing. In green, Abundant Growth is premier mana fixing, making it extremely easy to enable a light splash of another color if you're able to pick up a couple copies. Somberwald Sage is a ridiculous ramp and splash enabler for creature spells specifically, but the card dies to a Stiff Breeze, or a non-morbid Tragic Slip. By and large, if you're not in green, you should stick to 2 colors in this format. The only other exception to this is splashing off-color flashback spells. Most Selesnya and Boros decks would love to run Lingering Souls in their deck, for instance. Izzet decks might also splash black for Forbidden Alchemy to help boost their Rise from the Tides. You can splash these cards off of just a couple colored sources, since it won't be the end of the world if you don't draw the color you need to flash them back. After all, you were still able to cast the front half of the card. The existence of these off-color flashback spells make Evolving Wilds a premium card, much better than it typically would be. Remember, if you are attending MagicCon Chicago, then I'm hosting an Innistrad Remastered event on Saturday, where you can build a sealed deck from 4 Innistrad Remastered play boosters and 2 Innistrad Remastered collector boosters. I hope to see you in Chicago, so if you haven't reserved your seat for my Innistrad Remastered event, follow the link in this video's description and maybe we'll get a chance to shuffle up and play in Chicago. But if you're not attending MagicCon Chicago, there's still Innistrad Remastered events happening at your local game stores, and in that sense, I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. I really urge you all to try at least one Innistrad Remastered draft or sealed event. It really is a great experience.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Today, baseball legend. Is it fair to call you a legend?
Baseball lover. That lived his childhood dream. I made a couple All-Star games, won a couple World Series, played for 14 years.
And now you're going to get to play Commander. We made your commander as you. baseball card art. Look at that.
I am gonna swing this 2 cow at you.
2 cow, 2 furious. It's about milk.
How much damage is that?
Oh, I think there's something very bad coming our way.
We're on the same team, trust me.
How do you
If she can shuffle it, you can shuffle it.
I am taking off my jacket and it's getting hot in here.
All right, let's do it.
My dreams have been crushed. I'm sweating.